Hey everybody, Paul here from the Aptitude Outdoors Podcast. It's super crappy out today. It's like 50-mile-an-hour winds. There's rain. It's cold. And I was like, you know what? Let's stay inside today. So I just wanted to address a question that I get every so often from people listening to the podcast, watching the video. They always want to know about the gear. And you know, it ever changing. I don't always have the same gear all the time, but my current setup is like what I'm most happy with. Been working on new stuff like lighting and green screens and shit like that. So I wanted to kind of give everybody a quick synopsis of what I use and what I've found to be the best for different scenarios. As far as, we'll start with audio, then we'll move our way into video, and then, you know, anything I do outdoors with like out on the trails, like Tales from the Trail and stuff like that. It's pretty much all the same gear. It just depends on what situation I'm using it in. So to start, audio, when I'm indoors in the studio, whether it's at the podcast studio or at home where I do a lot of the streamed podcasts like the Zoom meeting style stuff, I do those all from home. This is a back room in my house that I completely tore apart and built into a podcast studio while COVID was going down. I also do music, so over here you'll see all the guitars and stuff. So my studio setup's pretty multi-purpose, but generally you want to start with sound dampening in the room you're in. It's kind of important. All the corners of my walls have, you can see these black strips. Those are bass traps. They're just big chunky foam pieces. These big panels right here, they're sound absorbing panels that my friend Jason made. He actually had them in his drum room at his house, but he was moving and he's like, hey, do you want these? So it's just kind of good timing. I think you can get them on like Etsy maybe, or wherever people make stuff. You can get them for relatively cheap, maybe like $100 a piece, $50 a piece, but that's a good place to start. And, you know, hanging the guitars and having a big cable rack over here that I hang all my cables on and stuff, that really helps dampen some of the sound. Anything to just diffuse the sound or break it up is really important. I mean, you can probably still hear a little bit of a reverberations in the room, but I'm doing the best I can. You know, don't get paid to do any of this, so it's just all on a budget. Compared to any other room in the house, it's pretty dead. So that's the best place to start, is making sure your room isn't super echoey and crazy. Even hanging up like thick curtains or anything like that is sound, where you start with sound 101. And then I record everything into either a Zoom recorder. I have a Zoom H4n at my house, which I don't really use that much anymore, but if I'm on the go, I will use that. It's got 2 XLR inputs, but at the podcast studio, we used to use a Zoom H6n, but we've all upgraded to all recording into a DAW, digital audio workstation, inside the computer. Doesn't matter which one you use. I've been using Ableton for a long time at the studio on my laptop since I have Premiere or Adobe set up. I also use Adobe Audition to track sometimes, but either way I record directly into a computer. And to do that I need an audio interface. Recently I've upgraded to the Focusrite Scarlett 18i20 interface. For the average podcast recording, it's super overkill. They make smaller versions that are like 2-channel inputs, 4-channel inputs. I have an 8-channel input, but that's for various reasons. I have a lot of different, you know, scenarios where I need different ways to plug things in, and I have permanent things that are plugged in all the time. So it just makes it easier for me to have 8 channels. That way I'm not bouncing back and forth and pulling this desk away and plugging everything back in and moving cables. It's easier for me to do that. And then I have a patch bay, which I luckily found for like 30 or 40 bucks at a used guitar store. Just happened to find it, which is not necessary for my setup. It's kind of necessary because I can mount it into the front of my desk and all the cables are routed to the back. So I don't have to keep, like I said, going back and forth. So that's really useful. So that's kind of where you start. You need a way to get audio into your computer, or you need a way to record something. And there's simpler ways. Like you can use a lav mic into a cell phone. That's totally fine. I just really enjoy playing with audio as much as I enjoy being outdoors. So for me, I kind of went a little crazy with it. So once you have a way to get the audio into the computer and record it, or into a hardware interface like a Zoom or a Taz camera, whatever you use, that's a good place to start. And then from there is the microphones. Everybody wants to know about microphones. I mean, if you know anything about podcasting, everyone in the world is always on camera with the Shure SM7B. It is a beast of a microphone. It's just the broadcast microphone. They make a lot of other ones. They make Rode, they make all this stuff. I have the Shure SM7B for the podcast I do for a local business that I work with. They bought Shure SM7Bs, so I just use that because I have access to them. They're $400 a piece. If I personally were running this on my own without being able to borrow some of their equipment, I would definitely probably not be using a Shure SM7B, I'll tell you that. And for me, personally, one of the best budget microphones that I've found that's relatively affordable is the Sennheiser E835. These things are workhorses. I got all mine used for like $60. I have 3, because usually I don't do any more than 2 guests. It's just too hectic. I don't like doing that. So the Sennheiser E835 is a great microphone. I think it sounds really good, and I actually sent a blind test to a few of my friends that are podcasters, and I used 4 different microphones, and I asked them which one they thought sounded the best, completely objective. They said the Sennheiser E835, which is a potentially $60 to $80 microphone. New, they're like $100, and I really like the way they sound. If I travel, I'm taking those with me. I take 3 of them. I run them into the Zoom H6N, or if I have my laptop, whatever interface I'm using, I just use those. They're super reliable. They sound super good. I'm just really overall happy with those microphones. Other than that, I have a MXL 990. I have an MXL 770. Those are both condenser mics, which are powered by 48 volt phantom power. They do sound pretty good. Those are also pretty budget. You can get the 990 for about $100, and you can get the 770 for about $70 as of the time of recording this. They both sound pretty good. Condenser mics tend to have a little bit more high end. They sound a little bit more crisp, but they aren't necessarily like broadcast sound. So whatever that means to you, if you're on a budget and you don't mind using those, I think they are pretty good, but they do not block out a lot of the background noise, which these dynamic microphones like the Sennheiser and the Shure will block out a lot more of the background noise. Those condenser mics are going to pick up everything. They're going to pick up every echo in the room. They're going to pick up a ton of noise that you probably don't want. So unless you're in a controlled environment, they're usually not the best. Another thing that I use quite often when I'm doing shots like this, when you see me back and facing the camera, the really crisp HD looking camera, I'm using a lavalier mic. They're pretty affordable. You can get ones, like I said, that hook up to your phone, or I have XLR ones that are powered by phantom power. They sound pretty okay. You can get them for like $35 on Amazon. We're not talking like a $200, $300 lav mic that professionals use. They do a good job. They block out a decent amount of noise. They just clip onto your shirt. They can kind of hide them out of the way, and they shoot right up at your mouth. And they're easy to work with, and you don't have to have microphones in your face like when I'm doing the podcast. They're pretty easy to work with. So that's also something that's really handy to have around for just talking directly into a camera or doing stand-ups or whatever you're doing. A lav mic of any sort is pretty good. They totally make a ton of knockoff ones on Amazon. And, for a lot of us podcasters, we're not, independently wealthy, or we don't get paid a lot to do this. We just happen to have to figure it out because we have stuff we want to talk about. So even if you're podcasting and you want the most basic setup ever, a lav mic is awesome. Even if it's just you hook a lav mic on you and your guest. You can get a 2-pack of lav mics on Amazon for like $75, which is what I had. Perfect. It's a complete upgrade from just recording straight into a cell phone. So a lav mic, great addition to your toolbox, we should say. So for listening back to your audio, you're gonna need some sort of speakers or headphones. I use studio monitors. To me, that's the best way to listen back. It kind of, you're listening to it in real, like there's air being pushed like to your ears, and there's vibrations happening like in air rather than in headphones. There's only like this much space, or if you use an earbuds, there's no space. So I don't like to mix in headphones. I would say only time I use headphones is when I'm trying to do like a balance music under my podcast audio, like to make sure it's not competing with my voice. That's the only time I'll use headphones. Any other time I'm using studio monitors to mix. Currently I have what are they called? The BX5As M Audio. They're very old. I would say they're probably pushing 10 years old. I got them used off of my buddy for $50 for the set when he upgraded his studio monitors. And I am upgrading my studio monitors now, but they are on back order. I've been waiting for almost 2 months. Hurry up, Sweetwater and KRK. Jesus, it's been 2 months. I want my freaking monitors. I'm upgrading from a 5-inch speaker to a 7-inch speaker. I know it doesn't sound like much, but it's going to make a huge difference. And these ones are starting to get a little unreliable. There's some crazy hiss that's going on. It's really driving me nuts. So I'd say for 10 years, I've got my money's worth out of them. But I would say if you really are interested in sound quality, I would get some powered studio monitors, because you're going to be hearing it more accurately to the way it was recorded. I know that can be an investment. You can find used ones, but if you have an audio interface and powered speakers, you're going to get a much better, clear sounding representation of what the audio actually sounds like. That's basically the audio part of it. Interface, digital audio workstation, recording software, whatever you want to call it, and microphones. That's your basic podcast setup. Next, we will dive into the crazy part, which is video and lighting. Video. Video is not something that every podcast does. Completely unnecessary unless you're me and you're a psychopath and you love it. I started out with a Nikon D5600, and then I really used that for a long time. It was affordable. I got it like a package deal with 2 lenses and the camera and memory cards and all this crap for like $700 or $800 a few years ago. I didn't even know how to use a DSLR. So I started out with that. I learned it inside and out. I learned how to shoot manual and do video and all this stuff. It's a 1080p camera, crop sensor. And then, I kind of learned its limitations. I learned what I didn't like about it, what I really liked about it. For someone who's starting out, maybe it might be a little hefty on the price. But one of the advantages of that camera is it has a screen that flips out, which is really nice, because when you film yourself like this, you're a one-man crew. You don't have any way to see yourself. So that screen flipping out is really useful, especially when you're on the go and you don't have a whole setup. Like I'm here at my house, I have a whole, so I can grab whatever I need at any given point in time. But that is a pretty decent camera. I know a lot of people use Canon and Sony and all this stuff. I just started with Nikon because it was literally what I could afford at the time, and it was cheap, and it came with lenses, which is, as a starter, it was great. And I just kind of stuck with Nikon. Recently, I upgraded to the Nikon D750, and that's a full frame camera. If you look at some of my older intros from the podcast on YouTube and stuff, you can definitely see the difference in video quality. A bigger sensor is going to get more light, more information, all this stuff. And it works really good. A few things that I did upgrade on the camera is I got some new lenses. Currently, what this is on right now, what we're shooting with, is a Yongnuo 35mm lens. I also have a 50mm lens, which they both look really good. They do this kind of, creamy, blurry background. They're real easy to work with. They're real cheap. This 35mm I just got for $106 delivered to my house, and it looks awesome. The 50mm is a little harder to work with if you're self-filming, because you just have to be real further away. Like right now, I can touch the camera With the 50, I'd probably be back another few feet. It's just a little harder to work with. And then recently I also upgraded to a Feel World external monitor, which is literally sitting just below the camera frame right now. I can see myself, make sure I'm in focus. That was a game changer. I really, for what I'm doing right now, it's super necessary. And for that was like, I got a used one for around $100. And it really just makes my life easier. I can look at it, double check everything. If it stops recording for some random reason, I can make sure that I don't just keep talking on about nothing. So as far as a camera setup for filming like this, that's what I used. The D750 was a little hefty. It was like $1,500, but I use it all the time. For the other podcasts I do, I use it all the time. For the band stuff I do, I use it all the time. I go out and take pictures. It's a really great to have a DSLR of some sort and then to learn how to use it, because you'll really get a lot of life out of it if you're into this kind of stuff. And especially adding that video element to your podcast. Some people tell me it's a waste of time. Sometimes you don't get a lot of views, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. I like doing it. That's all that matters to me. Next, more camera gear. Obviously, if you are a vlogger of any sort, you have a GoPro, or a DJI. They make a similar thing to that. I have GoPros. That's what I use to film in the podcast studio itself. The issue with DSLRs is they only have like a 20-minute runtime max, which really sucks sometimes. But the GoPros can run forever. They have no limit, just the memory card and battery life. So I plug the GoPros in directly to a power source. Usually I plug them straight into a power strip and have them powered so they don't die that way. And then the GoPros, I have 3 GoPro Hero 7 Blacks. They look really good. You can set the manual settings up, and for stationary in-studio podcast, I haven't found anything for you can get them used or on sale now. They're at the Hero 9 now, so you can get them for relatively cheap. Like sometimes I see them for $250. 3 works for me, 1 per guest. They shoot in 4K, which I don't even do yet because it's just so much freaking memory. Really useful tool. And recently, someone gave me, out of nowhere, someone gave me a DJI Osmo Pocket thing. So you'll see me playing with that every once in a while. As far as I can tell, looks pretty cool. I'm gonna be going on some trips here pretty soon, and I'm gonna be taking that with me and playing around with it. But again, like the GoPro, it has built-in stabilization. There's really cool features like photography, panorama kind of stuff. Audio isn't as great on the DJI Osmo as it is on the GoPro as far as I can tell. But even starting out, they made adapters that you can plug lav mics in, like I talked about earlier. There's just an adapter for everything nowadays. So that's something that can save your butt a lot of the time too. So as far as cameras, I got the Nikon, I got the GoPros, and now I have the DJI Osmo. And I also occasionally, not for the podcast, but for the B-roll, I have a DJI Mavic Air. It's cool to play with. I just like playing with it. You can really add some awesome B-roll to anything you're filming. And if you're running an outdoors page, forest drone shots and river drone shots and all that stuff. It's just a nice element, which I'm hoping to get more into, but we've been locked down in COVID and rules are changing every other day, it seems like. So I never know what I'm able to go and do. So camera equipment, super important. If you're filming your podcast and doing these stand-ups, intros, outros, all this stuff, I really want to have a good quality to it. It's just kind of the ever-evolving thing. I'm hoping to build my quality and build it. I just do this stuff all the time, so I really love it. So that's camera equipment. On to the final and somewhat most challenging piece of the puzzle is lighting. Oh my God. It is more challenging than it looks. Recently, I've started to work a lot on lighting, and if you look back at some of my earlier podcasts, you can definitely tell that I've tried to work on the lighting. It's a lot more confusing to me than working with the cameras or audio. I've done that forever. Working with the lighting stuff is a new challenge. It's fun. I bought a cheap, this is what this is. You can see it. It's a $35 ring light I bought off Whoa, power just freaked out. Whoa. Anyway, told you the weather was bad out here. The bought this $35 ring light off Amazon, and it is kind of a game changer. I mean, you can see my face now. It's not all distorted, and it's got little speckles going on in it, like before in some of those podcasts I was doing before, as it was so dark. And then behind me, lighting up the wall, I bought some LED lights from Amazon as well. They're about $40 for a 2-pack, just to give some light onto the back wall so it doesn't look so dark. And obviously I have the light on in the room over my head. You can tell it's a completely different lighting color than the LED lights, so that's something I have to work on. As of right now, it's better than nothing. But yeah, having a well-lit room is something I've learned recently is very important, and that's something I'm working on in the podcast studio as well. Just a little more challenging because the guests are different every time, as you never know, if you're running late, you just got to set up all this lighting stuff, and it's also a space used by other people, so I can't just leave everything set up all the time like I do at home, which is a bummer, but it is what it is. But yeah, lighting. If you haven't looked into lighting yet, I've been told a million times my lighting sucks, so lighting is important, I guess. For some audio video nerd, I guess, it's the last piece of the puzzle that I needed to work on. So an important part to audio is not always just making sure your levels are good and just making sure that you hit record. I tend to take a lot of time to post-process, and that's where things get a little confusing. So if you don't understand the post-processing part of it, that's totally okay, because I've literally been doing this for 12 years now, messing with audio. It's been a hobby of mine for a super long time, so I'm still learning every day. I'm no means a professional, but a few things that I would learn to use are a generic compressor and a EQ. And an EQ is very intimidating to a lot of people, and compression is very intimidating to a lot of people because they're not super intuitive. But for the human voice, you can watch a ton of tutorials on YouTube. I'm not gonna go into the super details, but to get that more leveled, broadcast sound, start with compression and then work your way into EQ. Compression basically just levels out the loud and the soft parts. So a compressor will pull down the loud parts and it'll kind of make them level with the quieter parts, and then you can turn the entire volume of the rest of the podcast talking up. So it kind of makes it easier. You don't have to manually turn it up and down, which I hear a lot of people say they do. So it just makes your life easier if you just learn how to use a compressor. I think you'll have a way better time finishing your audio. And then EQ is just kind of a way to pull out some of the really annoying frequencies that you hear when people are talking. And then maybe if you're really interested in it, using something like a gate. But just a little compression and EQ goes a long way. So there's tons of videos on YouTube. Look up how to compress and EQ a human voice, and I think you'll get a good gist of it. Might take a few months to learn, just going in and out, but definitely will help up the quality of your audio. I know this wasn't an outdoors video, but I hope it was helpful in some way. If you're interested in starting a podcast or starting video or anything, I hope this was a good primer for you. I know it can be overwhelming. It's still overwhelming for me. I spend a lot of time just figuring out what the hell I'm doing. So I'm hoping that I can help you with showing you what I use. I know I have a lot of stuff, so it can be a little crazy. But thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you all next time.